Hi, everybody. Welcome to Project Geospatial. I'm Adam Simmons. Back with us is helping me host the show once again is Darryl Murdock. Adam and Darryl View the World. That's what we've named this series. So Darryl can give some plugs about that, but we have a special guest with us this time, Robbie Schingler from Planet, co-founder of Planet, to talk on the business of small sats. Darryl, you want to take it away from there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. And Robbie, thanks so much for taking time. We understand that you're ensconced in lovely Bay Area. And so thanks
Indeed.
for taking time to chat with us tonight. So, yeah, really pleased that you could make it because, we've got tons of questions. I wish we had like about 5 hours to talk with you, but we'll make the most of our time. I remember when you co-founded Planet Labs, the predecessor to now Planet, and talking about some of your aspirations then. And it's amazing to see how many of the things that you wrote down and articulated have actually come to fruition. Very cool. And I applaud you and Will and the rest of the team for actually building out what you said you're going to do. It's kind of, right? Isn't that the way it's supposed to go? Right.
It is. And you said the right word in there, which is team and resilience. 8 years, not giving up. So it does take a long time in order to get there. But a lot of the hypotheses that we've had, we've been able to test them and make some progress. So, but first of all, Adam and Darryl, great to be here today. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, terrific. One of the conversations that Adam and I continually have is sort of like the evolution of the overall, we'll call it the remote sensing market. I don't want to just call it the commercial imaging market. I don't want to call it anything else other than the remote sensing market. From your perspective, starting over the last decade, lots of changes. What are you seeing right now from a remote sensing standpoint that looks to be where the sweet spot of how to make money from a commercial sense really sits? Where does that actually lie? Because there's a lot baked into that, right? Because it's part of it is startup, part of it is how the U.S. federal government and other governments around the world get involved with the process and what that's, I'll call it a subsidy, but what does that bonus look like when you actually get involved with the U.S. government? So maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of the evolution of Planet from commercial back a little bit to the U.S. government world, and kind of like this 50-50-ish, my numbers, you tell us what they really are, split between, government work and commercial work.
Yeah, so much in there. And I think that can be an hour in and of itself. So let's definitely go back and forth and we can dig in on a number of things.
I'll get
the last point first. I think it's about 70 to 75% of the existing geospatial data and services market come from public funds in one way, shape, or form. Quite a large amount. The applications may be different, but if you follow the money, then you could actually see that this is something that was really the genesis of this entire sector came from government. On one side, it was for science purposes, and the other side is for national intelligence or national intelligence and national security, right? And really between those two is really the greenfield opportunity of this decade of creating a new information feed that's derived from space that then becomes truly commercial. And if we back up for a second and we think about space activities, the largest sector of the commercial space market is in geospatial telecommunications. And that really got its heyday in the 70s and 80s around being able to do backhaul and being able to connect the unconnected, and building out a viable business and a very profitable line of business for geostationary telcos. And I would say where we are today in remote sensing is just about to find that. We're now seeing the national security space community utilize quite a bit of commercial geospatial connectivity as they've been figuring out what they need to have as their own NTM under their own super secure activities versus what they could actually offload in their logistics, in their day-to-day planning that could be satisfied by commercial services. And I would say that same curve and arc is going to be happening in remote sensing, in commercial remote sensing. So it's actually a very exciting time. I do think that there are a number of new incumbents that are coming in that are awesome because it allows for good competition to occur, which really spurs innovation, and it spurs innovation not just in technology but also in business models. And that's a part that I would like to actually talk about quite a bit, which is where is the future going with respect to commercial remote sensing and future profitable lines of business? Because as it is today, it's really a relatively small market, and most of the industry reports continue to forecast it at growing at a healthy rate, 10 to 14% a year. But that's still relatively small in comparison to the strategic utility that geospatial and intelligence have given the warfighter and the Joint Chiefs and the president for the last 60 years. And being able to bring the same type of decision advantage and contextual information to a business leader. That's when we actually bring geospatial to the enterprise. We bring geospatial to the web, and we allow for people to have decision advantage that then supports our economic system be more effective. So I'm sure we can dig into a number of things right there, but please, Darryl, where would you like to start?
There are probably 5 different topics I heard there. Here's one that I'd love to be able to get your take on. So, you mentioned, different business models. Talk to us for a little bit about your ideas about sharing. And here's what I mean, right? So there's sharing between providers, right? So most providers have kind of gone, you mentioned an arc. It's sort of the arc of, okay, we've got our platforms, we collect data and we sell you data. Okay, so the days of selling pixels still exist, but that's not the primary product anymore, right? It's the primary raw material, but it's not the primary way of making the money. Okay, so now we've come up with derivative products, right? Products and services. Right. So the vertical integration inside each company has been ongoing for the last, maybe 5 or 6 years, where you take a look at each company that is a collector looking to be able to do some level of internal vertical integration. Now we're seeing as you mentioned, all these new players. Talk to us about what you see as the potential new models of sharing data and products and services between the actual collectors. So rather than being vertically integrated, you have basically an ecosystem that allows for horizontal integration, because that's the one thing that I see out there that it's very difficult. It's sort of like, you see onesies and twosies, but I don't really see what the business model would be to be able to kind of break through that. So I could literally, as a person wanting a certain product or service, I could literally reach out and say, this is what I want, put it together, folks, and then I'll buy it from whatever that consortium looks like.
Right. So that last thing will then come from a party who is bringing multiple sources of data together to then solve some mission utility or business need. Mm-hmm. And so that could be a third-party provider that's not a collector. Sharing between collectors, I think, is happening more on the technical side of things and the protocol side of things, rather than on the business side of things. So as you mentioned in the preamble of that, a number of the imagery providers or the collectors, they have to process all of that data to put it into the standard remote sensing formats for people to use, right? And so you can extend that capability just a bit more to then get into more higher level products and services that then have higher margins, right? So I think that that's a trend that is going to continue. But in order to really unlock the most value of anyone's data, it needs to be interoperable with other data sets, because most value is when you have multi-source coming together. And that's really where the collaboration is occurring between the data providers, is to recognize that geospatial data is going to the web, and looking at a number of the protocols that are coming out in forums such as the Open Geospatial Consortium, and in general, just other geo geeks that have been doing this stuff forever and collaborating with each other.
Yeah.
And so we see a couple in the last year and a half, such as COGS, Cloud Optimized GeoTIFF, and Stack, the Spatio-Temporal Access Catalog. And both of those things allow for there to be interoperability of different data sources. And I think that that's actually where the deep collaboration needs to happen in order to look at the market and see how much we can grow the market together as data providers, because there's only few that are operational, and not fight over the small crumbs that are there today, thinking about the business models of the past.
Yeah. So, if we look at the commercial sector in terms of your customers in the commercial world, that 25%, as you mentioned, how do you see their appetite changing, if it has, for specific products? And do you, when do you make a decision? I've always been curious about this. When to invest in, and yes, in fact, I think that this could turn into a market, even though I only have an N of one or two, right? Because I only have a couple of customers that might want this, but we see there's maybe some extensibility into other immediately, adjacent markets. Can you kind of walk through how do you internally make that decision to be able to create a product or a service that actually, speaks only to a handful of potential of existing customers, but has potential? What's that potential part that how do you make that evaluation?
Sure. I'll address that in a second. I wanted to correct the first thing around the 75% of the government market. That is the $6 billion addressable market for commercial remote sensing data and services. That's not Planet's book of business. So our book of business is more commercial than government. We have last year, I would say probably about a third to 40% was in agriculture, and about a third to 40% was in government, and that's global governments, not just the U.S. government. Then the rest are other verticals. So, all right. So now back to your question though, is that's where really good product marketing comes in and business development comes in. If you want to prototype a new product or service, you do just that. It's a prototype, and you typically do the analysis around the business value of the vertical that you're going after, whether it's oil and gas or forestry or agriculture, and really understand where the pain points are. And then you prototype a particular solution with someone who you think is going to be an early adopter leader, and somebody who will become a referenceable customer and a lighthouse customer in that vertical market. So you can then take that, if you then find business value and it's profitable, you then do the sales enablement, put it into your core sales force. So then you have a new product and service. So it's already been validated by early adopter customers. You've priced it well, you've positioned it well, and then you train up your sales team to then add it to your standard offerings. But that is the engine, right? Going from business development into sales, and you can do that with software, and you can also do that on the aerospace side of things.
So how long did it take you to develop that internal pipeline to be able to actually kind of go from your concepts into a true business process?
Well, I think it's important to time travel back when Planet started 8-9 years ago, and at that point in time, what really made Planet possible was the 3U CubeSat form factor, which then allowed for us to get access to space cheaply and reliably. And then we built out the engineering systems to make it possible. But the way that we did that is we started with the space segment first. We started with the satellite, and then we did the ground stations, and then we did the data processing, and then et cetera, et cetera. So it took us like 4 years to actually get to an MVP product. And if you are an entrepreneur, That's not conventional wisdom to take that long to get in front of customers, right? So, admittedly, we did something that I do not advise entrepreneurs today, which was it was an engineering innovation project to begin with, to do a major systems engineering build out a major systems engineering capability, full stack, from R&D to satellite manufacturing to mission operations to data processing in the cloud, all of that stuff. And we did that based on a hypothesis that we could, number one, get the cost per unit performance down so low that we can come up with a new data feed that's non-rivalrous, so a monitoring capability. And that's probably the first major innovation that we did in remote sensing market, was change the business model around that capability, because it's not a tasking system. Right, it's a monitoring system, and that means that we can resell the service or the imagery to many customers in multiple different verticals, and to price it in such a way that they still get business value, and they get the appropriate license out of it as well. And that allows for us to have tens of thousands of users and have a very robust education and research program where students pay relatively nothing. But then there's a site-wide license for an entire campus on a university, for instance, and it's super inexpensive. But it gets the publishable papers. It trains the next generation workforce for Geo on the web. These papers are things that we've included into our tech stack. We've hired people who have published these things, so it's all part of the overall kind of like ecosystem and evolution of it. I would say like the last 4 years or so is really when Planet got into the market, iterated really quickly like a normal product company. Whereas before we had the vision and the mission, but we had to prove out and build new technology from scratch.
I think that's a good transition. I want to one of our next questions, really, Darryl, with how analytics is changing based off of these new data sources and that new paradigm, right? So with monitoring instead of just collection. Can you answer that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's what's happening to remote sensing is happening to every sector by seeing the utility of cloud computing, of storage and compute, and on top of that, allowing the big major IT cloud providers out there to compete, driving the price down and driving the performance up every single year. And we're beginning to see a number of the cloud providers provide specialty services that actually support just geospatial. That's awesome. Those are market forces to ride. Whether you are a new collector company out there recognizing that's excellent. You don't have to build your own data centers. You don't have to worry about a whole bunch of that stuff anymore. And also if you are a startup that actually wants to build a new sense making application, you can do the cost for getting off the ground is so much lower than it was before. What it means for a company like Planet is one where we can offset a number of things that were on our tech roadmap for software, and go further up the value chain, go further up the stack, listen to more of what customers need today, rather than do more of the fundamental stuff around some basic change or object identification. So I think it is it's definitely in our world in geospatial. I don't think it's come through the surface of the water yet. It's still an iceberg underneath at the moment when it comes to actually mission utility and business value. But as the technologists know, as people within remote sensing know who've been spending their careers on it, this is definitely the wave that's coming. This is the crest that's here, that people either need to get on a board and surf it, or they're going to be left behind.
Well, actually, what I'm really curious about, Robbie, is the monitoring itself, the methodology here. There is a change in paradigm when it comes to traditional collection managers, traditional organizations like NGA or even the military, or use collection managers for new tasking, and the method of this continuous monitoring. Almost, do you even see a need for collection managers?
Oh yeah.
I mean, or how's that role evolved? Or how's that role evolving towards? Because in my perspective as an analyst, I know people don't like to use any type of term that says these roles are going to be replaced or they're not needed. I would actually dare say that they are going away, but you might be a lot more kinder with that thinking, you know. So I'll dare say it might be going away.
I remember when I first went into John Gulgazian's office when he was the head of Source at NGA, he had a sticky note on his office that said "Tepid is dead," right? And that was 5 years ago. So, and I think he's right. You know, it's very similar to, do you remember when Salesforce, you know, who's always been a really good guerrilla marketing company, and their first logo was, you know, a big like no of like software, no more software, the end of software. And clearly that wasn't the end of software. But software, as people knew it in the 90s, was you got a DVD or a CD in the mail, and you had to install it. So in that sense, it was dead. Software was dead because it was actually put in the cloud. And so when we and I think that the same thing is true here with Tepid being dead. It's not that it's dead. It's just the way in which you did it before is gone.
Yeah,
and it's undergoing a bit of a transition. Go ahead.
Yeah, the notion of it being a full cycle, and you can't skip between the pieces or insert at any point in time, at any point in part, at any time of any part of the TCPED process. I think that is, that's been proven out. You can jump in pretty much any place there. It doesn't matter where you are in the overall process. I'm really.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking
ahead,
more
Adam.
How much time is committed to these collection managers wrangling, organizing, trying to plan out the actual orbits of these things, when, you know, what time period is needed for the customer, that type of thing, rather than actually focusing on, the analytics themselves, making more of a tie down to what time of day they need for their target behind what's actually available or what they know is going to be available, rather than planning the orbits of the satellites and what collection platforms are actually out there. You know, I'm sure there's still some mix of that needed, focusing on more of a multi-source. But with this sensor saturated world we're in now, I just don't see these traditional roles the way they are, even right now, that as needed. So. Especially just putting the hands of a collection more into the hands of the analysts, more than having these individual roles. But that's just me.
I agree with you. I think that is absolutely true. I do think that it's going to get in some cases more complicated because there are going to be more machines to put into the systems diagram, right? But the human doing the analyst between each one of them, of orbitology or whatever it actually is gone. Like, that's a model. You don't need that anymore. And your models will get updated and updated and updated, get refined and refined. But really, this is all about M to M, right? So this is all about a broader digitization of certain things and IoT. You're going to get a signal from one place, you're going to test something else from another place, which is then going to queue up a different workflow. And that is that's where the fun part comes, because we're going to begin to think about what problem are we trying to solve for somebody. And then the more that collection planners, for instance, understand the tech stack in order to solve that problem, you can figure out ways of being faster at it, getting left of launch, anticipating what's about to happen. And I think that is where that's where the opportunities lie. So like it's not going to be a human who's figuring out which satellite is talking to which ground station and imaging one thing over the next. That's a model. But again, the more that we actually understand what people are trying to solve, then you can come up with really innovative ways of combining different data sources and workflows that allow information to be pushed to a user before they even know that they needed it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you teed that one up. That was like beautiful, because one of the questions that I was dying to ask you is that, okay, so can you talk to us a little bit about tipping and queuing, the way you see it happening, either the way it's happening now for Planet when you're using other sources, maybe they're airborne or maybe they're a UAS collecting, or even other satellites, and how you see that evolution happening?
Yeah. Well, again, tip and cue for me is really just is an input that then drives a behavior, and more that should just be seen as really an if this then that. If you guys remember that, website, or like or an M2M workflow. And so, and a tip can come from anywhere. And so, for example, many collection companies that are operational today, they get a tip, and they queue up in order to task, and that tip is weather. Is the probability of cloud too high to not even do it, right? And that's automated now, or at least the collection planner takes a look at the probability of cloudiness, then they can actually choose one over the other. And so like that's how we're using it today. But how are we going to use it into the future? Same exact workflow. It's just since we have a proliferation of these sensors up in space, it can allow for us to have more shots on target, and especially over areas where there's less congestion, that you can prototype and do a number of different things. So, for instance, with the Dove data, what we do. So we have two types of data sets at Planet. One is a persistent global monitoring capability of over 100 small satellites that image the entire land area of the Earth every day, and that system over time has been redesigned for computers, and that's to automatically stitch those imagery together, to create seamless base maps, to do feature extraction, and as well as land classification. And that then pulls out information into a much smaller shape. So to us, we call that getting the data shape down from the raw rastered data to the vectors and the points. Then based on that, you can do an if this, which is square kilometers of building over this area change more than 10% over a 1 week period of time. That's a math query. So that's the if. If this, then that can be task to SkySat there. And that's it. That's tip and cue. It's as simple as it is. It is not very difficult. People do it all the time, but the unique thing is when there can actually be an application that's very different. And so, for instance, if you are let's just do the building example again. But a company can build a sense-making application for state and local regulators that's trying to monitor construction permits, right? And so what they can do is they can take that publicly available vector building footprint information that's coming from the county. They can take in that exact same example that we talked about, the tip and cue of a SkySat to take a picture. And what they can do is they could actually set up for the state and local customer, the regulator, an application and a dashboard for them to see all construction that's happening over their region that they care about, who's on track and who's actually doing construction that doesn't have a permit. And they don't have to know anything about tasking a satellite, what spatial resolution it is, what a satellite is, what orbit it's in. They don't care. And that's when that's the real market opportunity, is to actually bring those sense-making applications to the enterprise so that people can make better decisions.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, so you were mentioning, the strong play that you have in the agriculture market. Having done a bunch of work in the commercial agriculture monitoring work back in the early days, Resource 21 and those folks. I'm really curious in the other direction, right? From tipping and queuing, from you're looking at a macro level, thousands of hectares at a pop, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands when you're dealing with, wheat, sorghum, and things like that. Do you see, or are you experimenting with it, or are you actually using right now ways to be able to say, hey, you know what, I got a tassel cap or some other algorithm I'm looking at. You know what, this area here, I need to either send a farmer out, or better yet, I'm going to send a drone out to get me some hyperspectral. Are you going to that level, or is that just simply a, hey, either large company or specific farmer, you need to go look at this plot of land?
Darryl, in reality, what we are doing is we provide remote sensing data to companies that can process their own remote sensing data. So they come up with their own workflow. A number of the companies that we have as customers are building those applications that they then sell. Right, so it is enabled by us, but they're going that next mile. As you're actually, as I'm sure that you can come up with countless of examples of being able to get more vertical specific in a particular application. We've got to choose which verticals we're going after and how much we want to stay horizontal, right? And so for us, if it's not obvious, our go-to-market strategy was to go to where the market is today, which is people who know how to consume geospatial data, get into their workflows, shift geo to the web. It's as simple as that. And we empower our network of resellers and value-added service providers, which is all part of the traditional remote sensing sector. But really go on a journey and choose the ones that we actually share our roadmaps with a lot, where they can see where it is the direction where we're going, and therefore where we end, and then where they pick up. And as done well with good partnerships, then it allows for nobody to be surprised, and for really the people that are building the sense-making applications or doing the services, they're highly profitable because they go further up the value chain, and so their margins are better. But that being said, we become more of a geo utility, where we then end up getting a cut across the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I could actually see, and your volume would therefore increase too. So because your value continues to increase. Yeah, I get it. Wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how you see the evolution of ground stations and the proliferation of 5G, and what's that really going to do to your business model, or what's that impact?
Yeah, those are two separate things. So then I would add the third, which is the mega constellations in space. So, but it's really around comms and remote sensing and connectivity. So the first one of ground stations. Look, it's pretty awesome that the big IT companies are getting interested in space, and each one of those big IT companies are thinking about it in a bit of a different way. Amazon starting with the ground station and then going up. It's really smart. I think they have a really good go-to-market with respect to secure comms. And when you actually look at the comms market, which vertical do you go after first? Whether it's backhaul or whether it's actually doing intranet, secure intranet for stuff, or going straight to consumer, right? And consumer is always the hardest one in order to do. So on the ground station side, we see a number of companies that are being started up in order to do ground stations as a service for new people coming in. I think that's great. And you also see the what are they called? The rocket companies, recognizing that it's actually not really good margins, especially in the small launch companies. And what is more profitable is when you provide a service that then goes over every year. So if your launch is $10 million, and then you have integration with ground stations as well, and a mission control system, maybe you charge them $3 million on that, or amount terabyte per month or something like that. And so it becomes more of a long-term sustainable business model. And so I do think that that integration will probably happen, either from a satellite bus provider or from a rocket provider, to then allow for there to be better subscription business models for things historically that are kind of a one-off sale. So that's ground stations. 5G. This is broader. This is part of the overall sensor revolution that we're in, and just IoT. All that space, all that remote sensing is the same. It's part of the IoT and sensor revolution. It just happens to be floating up in space. And I think what's interesting about that is not only will a lot of data go back and forth, but I think when you combine that with really, really, really low power, high performing edge compute capabilities, that's more of a bit of the architecture. I think that where things will go with sense making application, where you send queries to all of the different sensors, and then the processes are actually run at the sensor, and then the answers come back. That will be faster for the user. And I think that's a bit of a smarter architecture. And we've seen that before over the history of computing, going from very decentralized to then very centralized systems. And we're going back from a centralized system, i.e. the cloud, even though we don't think of it as centralized, it really is, down back into a disaggregated system, being at edge compute. And the last thing I would say is with comms and the mega proliferation of LEO satellites, that's going to allow for real-time access to all of your sensors up in space. So to do late ordering and tasking immediately, the nanosecond before a task, you can do that if you have the right type of architecture within your automated tasking planning system. As well as, as I was saying before, the future of these terrestrial sensors is compute at the sensor. Same thing is also happening up in space. And so then you can have real-time indications that are actually going back down via a commercial space layer. And so then latency really comes down tremendously. And those are the three major trends that I would see that's happening within the connectivity space about remote sensing.
Now, 5G, that allows for a lot of other potentials, right? So you have military customers who might be looking for more data being pushed to mobile devices, but you also have a consumer level that might be enabled for getting this type of data, imagery data, or even multi-source data, more in the hands of individuals, not just consumers, but individual analysts out there, smaller companies who are all constantly on the move or in remote locations, right?
Absolutely.
Can you talk more on that? Because and that kind of overlaps with some of the things that I've watched Planet do, especially with enabling, once again, the ArcGIS Living Atlas indicators that you guys are working with. That was just announced, right? As well as the new base map plugin with Esri ArcGIS Pro. So I see connecting the dots there with enabling the data pushed down to individuals who are either working from home or even working remotely on their mobile devices.
Yeah. No, first of all, on the Esri partnership, it's been excellent. So, Esri has really been creating this sector with the right type of tools in order for people to extract the insights and get toward knowledge, right, and better decision making. And they're embedded everywhere, right? And they know business value and mission utility value almost better than anybody, because they're really, really close to the customer. And so they're an extremely natural partner for us to bring our data products into their tools, because it's already into our customers' workflow. And so, and together we're beginning to come up with some pretty novel things that we could not do by ourselves. So that is there's more to come on that partnership. It's really just beginning, but it's something that I'm really excited about. That, again, as you put it, Adam, just was announced at the Esri User Conference. So yeah, if you're listening and you have ArcGIS, you can get Planet stuff through it right now. End plug. But with respect to the way that I would kind of put your question, Adam, is that like space is going from being strategic to being tactical. Space is going from being in for the president or for the Joint Chiefs, and then to being actually in the field. And same thing in the commercial enterprise. In the field means you're a claims adjuster looking at hail damage of a crop in Iowa. And with 5G, you'll be able to actually get high resolution data, just like you're in your office. So I do think that it's going to end up changing the workflow for more people. That's what happens when geo gets to the web, and when the tools get better and better and better. The tools will allow for the data that needs to be transferred to be less, but then thankfully we're having more bandwidth, because we do have an insatiable desire of coming up with even additional data feeds that we actually want to stream through. So we'll always use all of the bandwidth that we get, but it's a race on one side, which is to send less data, and on the other side, which was increase the pipe. So, but I do think it's broader than that. Your message is the person in the field, whether you are a first responder for a natural disaster, or whether you are with Care International in Uganda, or if you are in a forward operating base. You're disconnected from your mothership, but yet that's where you need to be for you to do your job, and you're still connected with the real-time information that you need.
No, thanks for that. I actually, and I'm trying to make that connection because obviously I'm looking forward to things like that. Even trying out, the potential of what the Starlink constellation or the internet, global internet from the satellite perspective, will just open up so many doors beyond just 5G, just beyond the spectrum itself. Just reaching individuals from disconnected environments that way, and then bringing geospatial services and data from what you all have, just once again, my mind just expands significantly from that perspective.
So, Robbie, one of the things I read fairly recently, I've been kind of tracking it with interest. You mentioned early on in our discussion space policy. So I'd like to kind of shift gears a little bit in that direction. I read an article, and you were actually quoted in it. It was about the relaxation of the GSD restrictions, and the impact in the Middle East specifically. When we're taking a look at things like what's going on in the West Bank, right? And that was the very specific article. And if it's a topic too tight or too close to home that you don't want to comment on, I completely understand. But I think our listeners would really appreciate you painting a picture about what that really looks like, because it's a really involved discussion when we start talking about global competition that you're facing and all the providers are facing, but also it's like, okay, so there's obviously a very significant human security component of what we're talking about as well.
Absolutely. I think this is an open conversation that I welcome, and that we in a community should have together. So we're looking around the corner. I firmly believe that as a company, now in the 2020s, a technology company, you're not neutral. You have to take responsibility for the effect of your product on society, whether intended or unintended. And this is, this is an evolved, I would say, point of view, a mature point of view. Whereas the platform companies in the 2010s said, "Hey, we're a neutral provider," and whatever behavior emerges, it just emerges. And I don't believe that. So I do think that we have to take responsibility for that. So when we're talking about, personal security, community security, national security, and global security, each one of those things all have the same ingredients, but you're kind of playing at a little bit of a different level. And some of the ways that you kind of mitigate it, or that you bring about a new tool to each one of those sectors: personal, community, national, or global. You initially want to make sure that you're not jeopardizing anyone's national security or personal privacy or community security as you bring about this new type of information. And it's going to be a shift, right? We're talking about a sector that was invented by the government for decision advantage, and that shift is now is uncomfortable for those that have enjoyed that decision advantage for a long time, and that's the reason why I think a partnership is really strong. Last year, Planet did its third acquisition where we bought Boundless Geospatial. We did that for a number of reasons, and some of which is because of their long-standing commitment to national security and open source, but really to national security, to have deep trust with the U.S. government in particular, as this shift happens and geo gets to the web. And so I do think that this is something that is really an opening salvo around how to be responsible with a transparent planet. But ultimately, would not have started this business if with Will and Chris 9 years ago if we did not believe that transparency breeds stability and that it breeds better decision making. And we've seen that time and time again from a global security standpoint during the Cold War. The more that people understand the situation on the ground, the more rational the actors become. Is typically with lack of information is when the irrationality happens, and that's when things get a little complex and complicated. And I think what we need in the world today, especially in 2020s, is we need people to be making rational decisions, definitely for global security and for national security purposes. And I think what that falls into the values of this nation of being an open society, of abiding by the rule of law, of strong democracy, and also of commerce and entrepreneurship. And so all of those things shift the balance of how the U.S. national security community gets its advantage in the next 10 to 20 years is a little bit different from the way that they've enjoyed their advantage over the previous bit of time. And that's the reason why it takes a partnership in order to understand what can you do in the open, when are you getting too close to our national security, when is it obvious that we have to adjust our posture internally because we can see where the puck is going. And we know that this is actually something that we can get more advantage out of into the future. So ongoing discussion. There's no right answer to this by any means, other than actually checking each other, critiquing each other, supporting each other, and knowing that this is undergoing a transition, and the best way to do that is via partnership.
Yeah, it's I really like that idea, and it's funny, when I was looking at some of the things that you'd participated in, part of it was the Middlebury Institute, and you're talking about the transparency piece there, and it got me thinking about in 2017 when Director Cardillo in some minds ceded commercial imagery to the NRO for acquisition purposes. Can you talk a little bit about from a back a little bit to the business piece? How did that, if it did, and if so, how did that change the trajectory of your business that you had going on right then? Was it a small deflection, a large deflection? Did it cause you to sit back and reevaluate your business in any way? Just really curious in terms of what the immediate impact was to you as an organization, saying, hey, you know what, we have our goals and we have our responsibilities, but now we have this brand new way of doing business. What is that impact?
Yeah, look, Darryl, without a doubt, that move did impact Planet, but that is way secondary. So if I put back on my armchair, space policy hat,
you got 3 years to look back on, man. It's okay.
Yeah. No, it is the right move, irrespective of where it went or whatever. Knowing that the U.S. government has a lot of market power, you can buy things, or you can send a signal to the market around what you want to buy. Then that actually shapes the downstream ecosystem, the industrial base, not only for commercial services, but the same industrial base that builds stuff for you. For your national technical needs. So combining that together into a bit of a common space architecture allows for the government to get greater alignment. And so from a policy perspective, I think that's actually good to pull those things together. Now, how did it affect Planet? It slowed down adoption, right? Because we did know that There was, a commercial geo and activity working group between NRO and NGA for about a year and a half before it was formally moved over. And during that period of time, there was no additional really new commercial engagement because you know how it works in the government. If you're moving something from one agency to the other, you're moving an authority, you're also moving the budget. So the more that you end up buying before you know it's going, you're just cutting out of your own budget to give it to somebody else, right? So in reality, that did have an effect on our business. But again, from where we are today, we saw that coming. We understand it. I grew up at NASA. I spent 9 years inside NASA. And these are all very, very, very good reasons why it does occur. And the good thing for us at Planet is that, we don't ever want to have one customer have too much market power over us so that we can continue to build out our business because things do happen. And so luckily for us, we already had a pretty good commercial business and quite resilient so that slowdown of adoption did not slow us down as a company too much.
Robbie, looks like we do have some folks watching from the audience because I'm going to bring a question in from one of them, and it goes actually on your NASA experience, and this is coming out of left field here. Somebody wants to know, because of your experience at NASA, how that's affecting your perhaps future business plans with Planet. Do you plan on maybe creating small sats for imaging planets like, Mars or other planets in the solar system? And that may play off of some of our previous sessions we've had with, Dr. Tanya Harrison, who happens to work for you all as well. But yeah, somebody wants to know what Planet's plans are for perhaps making imagery satellites for places other than Earth.
Sure. Well, awesome. First of all, yes, Tanya of Mars is not Tanya of Earth. Her heart has been captured elsewhere within the solar system, but we absolutely adore having her part of the Planet family around what she does. But yeah, you're completely right. Last year, and JPL launched a couple of small satellites out to Mars, and they were quite capable. And they did some really interesting things. I think that when we take a look at the fact that small sats have been really proven to be collecting unique, valuable, scientifically valid data, it opens up the trade space for new missions entirely. Now, with respect to Planet, I guess our company isn't called Earth, but we absolutely are focused on this planet here. That is the core of the business. We're doing Earth observation. But yeah, and all of the aerospace stuff that we do have, it is entirely possible that you can add in a few things to make it a little bit more radiation resilient and to come up with interesting, much more edge compute capabilities. I think that's going to be necessary for doing some interesting imaging capabilities through the inner solar system. But I'm a space geek. I would be lying if I said that the dot at the end of Planet's logo was an accident. So yeah, I would absolutely love to get to that point of maturity of an organization for our core Earth imaging business and bringing that about in the most responsible way to all of society. That we can reward ourselves maybe with a couple of other missions.
In full disclosure, that question didn't come from Dr. Harrison. Looks like it came from somebody who's been watching our show and watching
it came from Dr. background. Manhattan too. Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't her.
But thanks for that. Darryl, do we have any last minute questions as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, Robbie, in the next couple minutes, if you could just kind of paint a picture for us, please, of what's going to be keeping you going for the next 3 to 5 years? What's the on the Planet roadmap of things that you really want to tackle? Back to the hard problem thing, right? You set this thing in motion called Planet Labs 8-9 years ago, and you literally wrote down what you're going to do, and you did most of that. Okay, let's say we did our, we're going to write those, 3 to 5 things and put them on our fridge and look at them every day. What are those things for Robbie, you personally, not just for Planet, but for you over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I'll do more 10 to 20 years because I think then it can be a little bit more vague, but you'll see a bit of the direction. So I fundamentally think that our industry has tremendous value that we can bring to more of society, and that is to understand the state of our planet. Putting up more advanced signal collectors up in space allows for us to measure more things that we can't see, and get toward these indicators, real-time information about things that are happening on the planet, whether it's emissions for greenhouse gas emissions, or whether it's to really understand preparedness and the risk that we actually have within our supply chain, and really when you combine those two things together, I think one of the things that we can add to the community is to get our global financial economy towards something that is more of a truer cost economic system. If we do not change our business as usual in what we're doing with this, I saw that you guys had Dr. Tucker on board previously with overpopulation and et cetera. But it's not just a number of people. It's the footprint per person, and so we have to recognize that we're going in an unsustainable way. And one of the trends that I think is really, really real is the ESG activities. So this is environmental, social, and governance activities. If you take a look at a lot of investors, you take a look at Bloomberg, you take a look at some of these hedge funds. They are including in way more environmental and risk into balance sheets of companies and organizations. And if those can be driven by global indicators that are spatially explicit, that are scientifically valid, that are unbiased, that becomes data, and that becomes beta for these models, and they become something that allows for us to really understand truth on the planet. I think that will end up driving us toward valuing companies well, putting a cost to climate change, and also valuing nature. So that is where I see the next 10 years going, is to really bring our tradecraft to the web and to the rest of society, and ultimately bring it into the financial sector and the insurance sector.
Yeah, that's. I love to have that. We'll have to have a discussion about the commons, and we'll have to have a discussion about other sensors next time we have you on. But really great having you. And I said to Adam, I said, all we have to do is just turn the mic on and not say much, and Robbie will deliver. And it has been just absolute pleasure talking to you today. And I hope we can have you back, and so we can start geeking out a little bit more on specific sensors, right? So I promised Adam I wouldn't bring sensors up today, and that will be hopefully a future discussion.
Sounds he promised.
Darryl, thank you so
I'm a little
much.
disappointed because I'd love to hear more about sensors. Me being the geek, but I'm also a big space person as well. So it's I love that stuff. But it's Planet's 10-year anniversary as of December at the end of this year, correct? Do you all plan on doing anything big for that anniversary? Yeah, maybe something to be announced.
A virtual birthday.
It is true. It is true. We incorporated December of 2010. Now we were still in our garage until February of 2012. First money in December of 2011. So, but yeah, technically on paper, 10 years is coming up. Yeah, we'll have to think about it. I know I actually don't know what we have planned. We should do something. Thank you for the reminder.
No worries. But it is a pleasure having you on, Robbie, and I appreciate it. You, as well as others from your company, who've popped on periodically over the last year or two, especially, and want to thank you all for your support and having you on. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks a lot, Darryl. Talk to you guys soon.
Bye, Robbie.